Dr. Shelest, what would be a victory for you in this war?
You know, for Ukraine, the victory is very simple. It is a restoration of our territorial integrity and sovereignty. Why I add both? It's not just the international law terms. Territory, because we understand that it is not about land. It is about people that are living at these territories, that are living under the very strong occupation and filtration. So that's why territorial integrity is important for us, because we understand whom we are liberating as for now. And sovereignty, it is the right to choose how we would develop ourselves, where we would go. Would we join European Union or NATO or stay neutral? But that is our choice. That's why for Ukraine, since 2014, we were joking that freedom is our religion. But freedom, not just in terms that nobody is controlling us, but also the freedom of choice, that it is only up to us to decide what is our future. That's why the victory is encompassing these two important things for us. It's not just returning back to the February 2022. It is much more, because we understand that what we are fighting now, it is our war of liberation. It is our post-colonial war. It is de facto that war that we haven't fought in 1991. And now we are just dealing with all those consequences.
Well, many people say that many Ukrainians that they live in the eastern territories of Ukraine that now are occupied by Russia, they wanted to be Russians. They are more Russians than Ukrainians. Is that true, or is it just that they love maybe Russian people or Russian language, but they are Ukrainians?
First of all, that is one of the best Russian narratives that really worked, especially for the foreign audience. That was one of the most successful narratives that they promoted. And origination of this narrative is 2004, the first Orange Revolution, when the Russian political technologists supported the politicians from Eastern Ukraine, and they've been trying to find the best campaign slogans or something like this. Because ethnically, this territory is more Ukrainian. You can see all the census. Definitely, it's multi-ethnic as many others in the Soviet Union. This territory was Ukrainian language till 1950s, when in the Soviet Union, they said that all universities should be in Russian language. So people, engineers, others who with a good education started to be Russian speakers. But if you look to the maps and pictures, that's really what is demonstrating. Like maps of 1918, even part of the Russian territory from our eastern side was part of Ukraine. So this territory never been with Russia. The second photos, for example, of my grandfather in 1950s, he's in Ukrainian embroidery. He's in the Ukrainian shirt, and it was normal for Donbass of that time. Nobody imposed this. You can see the same pictures from Mariupol city, from Lugansk city. So that is definitely the political developments that constructed a reality. But even more, if we return more to the 2014, when so-called separatism started, it was not separatism there. Those people who started the campaign there, all of them were Russian citizens. Mr. Girkin, or if you go to those who are political, all of them came from Moscow. So they came with the military support over there and then started to disturb the situation on the ground. But the first Ukrainian citizens who became collaborators, they appeared several years later. So when Russians needed justification that Ukrainians supported it. Plus 8 years of propaganda. That's also something we need to understand. I perfectly remember propaganda in 2013 in eastern Ukraine, from where is my family. For example, they believed in the gossip that European Union is asking Ukraine to adopt legislation about same-sex marriage as the prerequisite for the visa-free regime. And because of this, many people were afraid of the European Union and Russia as traditional values. So you understand, it was the constructing of this reality of anti-Western, anti-European sentiments at these territories. And when you have it constantly for 8 years, you start doubting what is closer to you, who are protector, who are aggressor, what is happening. But now when you're liberating villages, when people see completely different picture, you see how changes are coming to the perception, who are you and where you would like to believe. Those villagers, many of them are still speaking Ukrainian. So it's definitely not that Russian sentiments of separatism.
Well, we are sure that the European Union did not fully understand what Vladimir Putin wanted to do in Ukraine. They didn't understand it even after 2014, when there was the occupation of Crimea. Was that the case also in Ukraine? I mean, did you believe, even after Crimea, that Vladimir Putin, that Russia would have a full-scale war against Ukraine?
Honestly, we were not given more than 30% for this probability. Probably it is just the human nature that we don't want to believe in war or in something so negative. Most of the experts were speaking that Russians can bring additional forces to the east of the country, so they can try to occupy the whole territory of Donetsk and Lugansk regions. Or some people were saying that maybe some forces will come from Crimea to Kherson region, not fully occupying it, but taking the hydroelectrical station that they need to supply water to Crimea. That was probably the worst scenarios that at that time Ukrainians perceived. The problem is that in Ukraine, we definitely knew the Russian policy and Russian perception of Ukraine, because all the statements that Ukraine is not a nation, that Ukrainian language is artificial, that we are younger brothers, even that it is son of the Kiev ruler who established Moscow as a city, but we are younger, they are older brothers. All these notions were there, or that we need re-educate Ukrainians, that all Ukrainians who support European integration are Nazi. I mean, we knew about it, but we always thought that threatening Ukraine is more beneficial for Putin than openly attacking us. And this underestimation definitely cost us a lot of lives.
Well, I heard you a little bit in the European seminar talking about negotiating or not negotiating, or your stance. And there seems that there are many people that, and analysts and politicians, that believe that the West should begin negotiating with Vladimir Putin so that there will be an end to the war. Do you see Ukraine negotiating, go into negotiations with President Putin?
First of all, Ukraine definitely proved after 7 months of war that we have the agency to decide our future by ourselves. So the West have a right to negotiate with Putin only their own arrangements. If Italy would like to give up Lake Como, or France Nice, where there are so many Russian oligarchs, that is up to them. It doesn't mean that Ukrainians need to give up Crimea or Kharkiv or something else. So that is definitely the question that we need clearly to understand, that they can negotiate, but only their issues. They don't have any right to negotiate Ukrainian future. Moreover, Ukrainian people will not allow it anymore. So back in February, March, when the first Russian-Ukrainian negotiations started, first in Belarus, then in Istanbul, we were ready for the certain concessions. We discussed the possibility to return back just to the situation of pre-February. So meaning that Eastern Ukraine and Crimea will be out of this framework of the negotiations. We will talk about this later. Or there were even readiness among some governmental people to negotiate neutral status for Ukraine. There were proposals on the table about this. But you saw that Russian delegations were coming to each new round of negotiations with more demands that being just dissembling Ukrainian nationhood and statehood. And as for now, we also after Bucha and Irpin, when we saw these mass graves, when we saw the war crimes over there, the mood among the population changed significantly. Now more and more people are saying it started in Crimea, it will finish in Crimea. And what we are ready to negotiate is how Russia is going to compensate us all those losses that we had in terms of the lives and infrastructure and everything. So we definitely understand that maybe some type of negotiations will be in the end. The question is from which position we are coming to this negotiation. We are coming as the winning, we are coming as those who have the just cause, or we are coming because we're afraid of Russia. And that is the huge difference between many politicians in European Union member states and in Ukraine. We are not afraid of Russia anymore. We understood whatever we are fighting. We understood that we can fight and defeat these armed forces. And many in Western Europe are still afraid of Mr. Putin. So they need first to overcome this fear and to understand that the joint forces of NATO member states, of European Union, is much stronger than what Russia can put on the table, except of threat of the nuclear weapon. But here we also understand that it is some kind of Viagra for Mr. Putin. He needs it for threatening. He needs to demonstrate his power, because that is the reminiscence and remembering of the Soviet times when they could threaten like this. But if he uses, let's be honest, it means that he lost the conventional war, and it means that he doesn't have any other power to influence the European politics. So that, it seems to me, that will be more disadvantage for his power than for anybody in Europe.
And do you believe that the West, the United States, of course, but also European Union and the NATO members will continue to help you with this war against Russia? I mean, with weapons, because you need these kinds of weapons that the West can give you so that you can continue fighting Putin.
You know, we stopped thinking about this as hoping. We are working for this. We are negotiating with our partners daily at all possible levels, from experts. You know, I was really shocked when one of my friends, she's best of the best human rights defenders. She's speaking at the top level fora. Each time she's asking for weapons. And she said, like, could you imagine the person who is human rights defender who is asking our Western partners for weapons? But because we understand that for us, the weapons is the way to liberate people, not to continue the war. And definitely, back in March, nobody was even dreaming that we would receive HIMARS or any type of the heavy weapons, long-range missiles. Now we are receiving this. Back in April, nobody could believe that we would receive new ships. And now the United Kingdom is delivering us two minesweepers. Back in June, I couldn't imagine that the US will be speaking about the airplanes. And we've been lobbying the congressman that we need to start teaching our pilots how to use the US-made airplanes. We are doing it already now, I mean, in a better way. So never say never, and definitely work to receive more what you can. Because one of the big reasons why we are still receiving, why a lot of countries, including Germany, started changing their position, they see how we use these weapons. Originally with HIMARS, it was the best example. The US was afraid that we would start targeting aims at the Russian territory. They were not sure how prepared we are for using these. As soon as they saw how we use it in Kherson region, targeting stockpile of ammunitions, bridges, so that infrastructure that can break Russian logistics and help us, they started to be much more aware, and in each new package of support, there is more and more HIMARS or more and more ammunition for HIMARS. So with additional weapons, we'll have probably the same. But we definitely understand that this ammunition to pour in all our partner countries are not unlimited. It's also the question of production, of their own capabilities, and understanding that when they're giving us the weapons, they're giving us the weapons not to have the war at their own territory.
So it's a fact that the war in your country has changed all the security architecture in Europe, and maybe not even only Europe. How do you see that evolving? How do you see this changing, becoming a fact? I mean, we saw Finland, we saw Sweden, we saw that NATO, as President Macron said, it's not brain dead, that's for sure. And there is a resurrection of NATO. So how do you believe, also as an expert, that things will change and will remain changed even after the war ends?
You know, Finland and Sweden, that is probably one of the best and the most tremendous change that nobody could imagine, even Swedes and Finnish. When I talked on the first day of the war with my friend, the Swedish military, he said, how can we help? I said, join NATO. He laughed. He said, like, Anna, that's impossible. I said, let's see. In 2 months, they applied for the NATO membership, and now we are waiting for the final steps. With Finland as well, everybody been asking Ukraine to become Finland, type Finlandization of Ukraine. It was the most popular topic. Now I'm joking that I'm ready for the Finlandization 2.0 because it means understanding what are the threats and what are the best ways how to deal with these threats. But in general, I mean, Finland and Sweden definitely will have a significant change, not only military of the architecture, but also psychologically. That neutrality is probably not the best decision if this neutrality is not bringing more peace and security for your countries. Point number two is, it seems to me that now we are witnessing the process of shafting or, I don't know, the turbulence in those who have the first violin in terms of the decision-making in European Union and in NATO in security sphere. It's not anymore France and Germany. Let's be honest. These countries lost the power and the authority of the loudest voice. With those activities that we see from Estonia, from Lithuania, from Romania even. So at least the Baltic states, the Poland, is not anymore the smaller, the newest, the youngest. They are those who are really set the agenda in terms of the security within the European Union and NATO. And France and Germany will need to consider these in the future arrangements, because from this security can be other developments because of this in terms of the decision-making inside of the organization. It's also the third is return to Britain. United Kingdom, that not just supported Ukraine, but started to be more and more involved. It's definitely not returned to the European Union yet, but it seems to me that nobody is doubting that the United Kingdom is ready to protect and to defend the European partners, that they're not going away from the European problems. And with the agreements they signed with Finland and Sweden about their security guarantees before the NATO is clear demonstration of this, that Britain is getting stronger voice in terms of the security issues. Then it is definitely the change of the China role. Because of the Chinese position, we see more and more countries who started doubting the effectiveness of Chinese cooperation. How can it be? What can be the Chinese role in the future? So that's the new trend that we will see in the future. And the last but not the least, it is the audit of the capabilities of the European countries. Because the necessity to deliver some military support to Ukraine, weapons support to Ukraine, made a lot of countries to look what they have in their stockpiles. What is the conditions of this and how much their armed forces are operatable? And unfortunately here we have a lot of bad news. Among those countries that we perceived as the strongest, when Germany opened their stockpiles, they realized what bad condition and bad maintenance they had of their armored vehicles or tanks, for example. It's happened the same with Spain, but that is what we knew, what became public. How many other cases that we don't know. Also, how many of their armed forces are ready to fight in case of the attacks like these, how much innovative they are in terms of their weapons, like how many of them bought drones before or thought the drones really can change the warfare on the ground. So all these questions we will be witnessing the next months, if not a year. And I hope that both political and military leadership of our partners will make the proper lessons learned and will understand that unfortunately war is not over and war can come to the European continent. So it's better to be prepared in advance and to be resilient in advance rather than become firefighters.
Dr. Shelest, thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation.